So I want to quickly use this time to talk about some of the main problems that competitive Halo players have at this moment in time. I want to touch on just general competitive Halo as well as region-specific problems. The first point that I kind of want to bring up is something that always gets brought up in the community once in a while because someone gets accused of it, is the lack of anti-cheat. Now, the lack of anti-cheat is a big problem when majority of Halo is actually online. Now, I understand it's not as simple as just, fixing the anti-cheat or, making a good anti-cheat. But I think HCS or 343 needs to be more transparent on how they do checks when someone has been accused of either cheating or, altering the game to benefit them in any way. I know it's not as simple as, every single person that gets accused of cheating needs to get checked, but when a community collectively comes together and says, hey, this guy's suspicious and needs to be checked, I think 343 or HCS need to step up and say, okay, we're gonna set out an investigation. Now, the most recent case of this happened in Europe. So there was a player called Shady who was arguably one of the best players in Europe at the time individually. Now, initially people were saying, this guy wasn't cheating, but then someone actually went out and bought the same cheats that this guy had and proved that this guy was cheating due to cross-referencing the footage. Now, it's pretty terrible the fact that someone actually had to go out and buy these cheats when the community had collectively come together and there was a big debate whether this guy was cheating. I feel like in that situation, when something like this happens, HCS or 343 have to step up and say, we are going to investigate this player. To kind of make matters worse, this player hasn't even been banned as far as I'm aware. HCS or 343 haven't made a statement on this player whether he is still allowed to compete. I'm pretty sure the European Halo community has just collectively come together and exiled him. My second point kind of links to the first point, sort of. It's just about general communication that HCS have with the pro players or the community. HCS seem to not really communicate with a lot of the top players or even the top AMs about certain decisions within the competitive scene. Now, this includes maps, in rotation, as well as game types in rotation. So, for the first 2 years of Halo 5, we played on AR starts as well as a full-blown radar. Now, that's fine settings, that is Halo settings, but it's not really where the competitive scene kind of lies. Pro players as well as top AMs advocated for years to get that removed, and finally it was eventually removed. Now, a more recent thing of something similar like this happening was Spartan really trying to get the SSG Invitational format, the tournament format, changed. Now, there was no response, and I even reached out to Spartan myself to see if he got contacted by 343 or HCS, and he said radio silence. Now, I understand in certain cases things have to be the way they are, but I just think 343 and HCS could really benefit from stepping up their communication. I think the members of the community would be a lot more happier and even more understanding. Like, at this moment in time, it definitely feels more like us and them rather than us all together. I think even, or especially if it's bad news, with a little bit of an explanation, for example, this interaction with Bound and Tashi, he kind of acknowledged what he said and said, next time we'll make changes, which is fantastic. Plus, I think the main thing is no one likes to be ignored, and once again, I understand that they can't reply to everyone, but they clearly do reply to, pro players, which is, in my opinion, the community's kind of Halo representatives. The next point is a more region-specific problem, but I still think that it needs to be addressed, is the fact that players in ANZ or Australia and New Zealand quite literally cannot find ranked games unless they play under a VPN. Now, this is obviously a problem because these players pay monthly for a VPN just to play Halo, which is a free-to-play game. And on top of that, if they own an Xbox, which I did when I lived in Australia, there was no solution. I couldn't find any games unless I searched with someone who had a VPN. My next point is kind of like I'm beating a dead horse, but I feel like it has to be constantly said, is the fact that there's no LAN events outside of North America. So if you're an amateur player placing outside of, top 3, top 4, depending on your region, you pretty much don't get anything to show for it. And I can really sense that the population outside of North America really seems to be dwindling. And the proof is the fact that quite recently, Europa Halo announced a grassroots LAN in Blackpool, and I can already tell that so many players have been coming back just to practice and play for that LAN. Now, the next point isn't a big deal, but I've kind of wondered this for a while now, is why in every other Halo, when you go on multiplayer, it separates casuals and ranked playlists. I understand Halo Infinite only has about 1 or 2 ranked playlists, One of them being Arena at this moment in time, and the other one I think being SWAT. But I think it would still be nice to see almost like a drop-down menu for when you click on multiplayer, it separates casual and ranked playlists. The reason I speak about this was because recently I got contacted by a friend who I met in real life, asking how to play ranked, and he was wondering if he had to get to a certain level first before he could play ranked. So this clearly isn't easy for, newer players to kind of navigate or even find. So I think Halo Infinite right now is in a desperate need for a UI update.
Personally, to me, it just kind of feels like the ranked game mode has been shoved to the bottom of the playlist and kind of hidden away, in my opinion. And I think a distinction between casual and ranked modes would help, like getting more people within the scene is all.
So that's the end of the video, but I just want to quickly say, I know the past few videos of mine have been quite depressing in terms of oh, this is what 343 or HCS can do better, yada yada yada. But I just thought it's worth mentioning. And I'd like to, in the future, don't get me wrong, I'm still going to talk about some of the problems that Halo has, or specifically international players have, or even just improvements that need to be done. But I think I would like to go down a lot more lighthearted kind of route in the future anyway. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. And let me know your thoughts. If there's any more problems that players have, if there's any more issues or any issues that you've experienced yourself, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. So let me know.